Welcome to Emerging Collectibles. I'm Fabrice Katiba, where I, along with my car fanatic friends, will be reviewing some of the best cars from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Why don't you join us on our journey as we showcase some of the best cars, what it costs to own them, what it costs to maintain them, and what it costs to acquire them. We're going to highlight the good, the bad, the ugly. We hope you'll join us as we review cars from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, in which we consider today's emerging collectibles.
Get away from me! Why should I trust you?
Because right now, I'm your best chance of staying alive.
This is a 2006 Aston Martin V8 Vantage manual. 44,000 miles on the odometer. Really a nice car. I'm pleasantly surprised at the overall quality and how well this car has held up over the last 12 years. Despite being in Southern California with the heat, it's an amazing car. I can't really fault it for anything. I've always been a huge fan of Aston Martin. And the V8 Vantage is Aston Martin's first kind of foray into mass production cars. Traditionally, Aston Martins have been all hand-built, as they are still today, but the V8 Vantage was an opportunity for Aston Martin to reach the masses, so to speak, and compete with the Porsche 911 of its time, and give people an option. Here we have a midship two-passenger coupe with a V8 engine, 6-speed manual gearbox with a transaxle, so ideal weight distribution. Exceptionally built car, to say the least. I mean, fit and finish in this is phenomenal. It easily trumps new cars today that are mass produced from other manufacturers. So some real cool tidbits. It has sort of the James Bond key. The latter cars would have a key that would just slot in here, and then you would hit the start button. But this being an early car, still used a key and some other parts from another manufacturer's parts bin. Pretty cool nav unit. Isn't the most ideal setup. Again, Aston Martin's first foray into production cars, a lot of parts were sourced from different manufacturers, but 12 years old and the screen still reads well, ultra reliable. Fit and finish has been great. The leather, as you can see, is worn very well, or not worn at all for that matter. Only 44,000 miles on the clock on this car, and it'll probably easily go 144,000 just the way this car is built. So let's give it a start and have a go. Alright, so you're all probably interested in what's it like to drive a $50,000 Aston Martin that's 12 years old. It costs about $130,000 new, and it's seen its fair share of use. With 44,000 miles, it's certainly low mileage by any other recognition for any other car, but for a car of this caliber, 44,000 miles seems to be a lot. So what can we expect? Number one, first thing, in getting in the car and just driving it, 12 years is an eternity in auto manufacturing today. Ironically, or I should say, to my delight, more than ironically, this car drives really well. Its feeling for the steering is a little bit on the heavy side compared to, let's say, a modern M3 or M4. The shifter, a little notchy and not as precise as we'd like it, but nonetheless, it's an amazing car. When you drive this, you really do feel special. You don't see yourself coming and going on roads in Southern California for first and foremost, unlike every other car where there's you know, 3 dozen 911s at any given stoplight, a ton of Mercedes two-door coupes. The Aston Martin is kind of a rare bird in this environment, which is kind of nice when you really want to stand out in a crowd. Fit and finish of the interior, as I mentioned earlier, is exceptional. The car really just feels comfortable. All right, so let's go for a ride in the V8 Vantage here. 6-speed manual box, V8 engine, revs to 7,200 RPM. This particular car has an exhaust on it, so it really wakes it up. Really lets that V8 engine breathe. And you know, if you didn't know it better, you'd think you were going to Le Mans and taking this car up through the revs. So shift's really nice and smooth. The gear lever is a little notchy for at least what I'm used to driving other cars. But the driver position, the controls, the adjustability, and the gauge layout is phenomenal. For whatever reason, Aston Martin gauges read the opposite, so what we're used to on most German cars per se, but nothing that is out of the ordinary and isn't easily recognizable or you can get used to for that matter. The car is just a lot of fun. This car also has H&R lowering springs on it. You would think a car of this caliber that's been lowered would ride rough. The H&R quality in build in terms of the ride comfort for this car, phenomenal. I mean, I think it quite honestly rides better than it did stock after we had the springs replaced because we've gone to a progressive rate spring from a linear rate spring that it's factory equipped. So lowers the car approximately 3/4 of an inch, gives it more of that European type stance, and it makes it a little more fun in the corners. Again, V8 engine, by today's standards, is it extremely powerful? No, it's not. But it does something that a lot of cars don't do. It's engaging. It makes the right sounds. It makes you want to drive the car. It makes you feel like you're part of the car. And that's kind of something that's been lost with modern cars. And for the price of, let's say, $45,000 to $60,000, you have a hand-built British icon that was over $100,000+ new. You can drive every day. So it's a bargain, I think, on the used car market. You know, sure, a lot of the sort of pseudo JDM hot econo hatches are probably going to be faster, but it is kind of a special thing to drive an Aston Martin. I mean, after all, James Bond drove one, so why not try and feel like James Bond for a couple hours or so many miles? The ergonomics of the car, really good. I'm not the tallest guy at 5'7.5" or 5'8" on a good day, but you really just fit well. I mean, and I think this car will accommodate drivers up to 6'3", 6'4" with the seating arrangements. The seats are comfortable. You know, they're not really harsh. It's just a really nice GT car that you can drive every day. The controls and the layout are there. The shifter's close, it's short, just a little notchy as I mentioned earlier. But other than that, this is a great car, and I would definitely recommend this as a used car for anyone who's looking for something that's fun to drive, reliable, and relatively maintenance free. These cars are known to have a couple little quirks. Clutches were an issue on a lot of the earlier cars. Most of the cars on the road today have had that already sorted. Ironically, this car, we believe, still has the original clutch, and you can feel it when you press it a little bit. It's a little heavier, so you know, I personally like that feeling, where I feel I don't like a really assisted clutch, I would say. Like for instance, on a 911 Turbo 996 or 997, they have that hydraulically assisted clutch, and it's really vague in feeling. This, you definitely need to use your leg, but you don't need Popeye calves to depress the clutch and use it. And sitting in traffic, there's more than enough torque in the engine to just kind of putt around, take off from second gear. Sixth gear, when you're just cruising around, you can be in 1600 RPM. You're not finding yourself having to downshift to kind of accelerate the car. It just magically just does it on its own. So the power band's really nice. The only real complaint that I have of the car in its driving is the pedal feel for the accelerator. It's throttle by wire accelerator, but it feels like it's cable driven, and it just kind of feels like it's elastic, which is kind of weird to me compared to cars of this era, whether it's German, Italian, or what have you. So that's probably my biggest complaint. I would think that it's a little vague. The engine, for being a V8, I'd like it to rev a little quicker. I mean, I guess everyone ultimately would. I think it would only enhance the feel of the car. But other than that, it's good. You get used to it. Jumping out of a high revving Audi R8 that I drive relatively normally, this engine is definitely slower to respond. But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's fun. When you get used to it and you really just start driving the car, you really enjoy it. And it's fun. So that's probably my biggest complaint with the V8 Vantage. I don't know if the later cars had this problem addressed, or this is just an inherent quality of an Aston Martin, but if I had to change anything, that'd probably be the one thing I improved. I know there's a lot of tuning solutions for these cars, software upgrades that also improve throttle response, and it's my understanding with bolt-ons, just components such as a software tune, full exhaust, some high flow cats, and a couple other things, you could stand to gain 50 horsepower on this particular engine and improve also the throttle response. And believe it or not, if you don't have a heavy foot, I'm told it improves the gas mileage too. The upgrades are no more than a factory clutch system, and they solve the issue altogether with any sort of drivability problems with the clutches. I haven't driven an e-gear car. I'm told the transmissions are quite lazy, so I would certainly recommend a 6-speed manual. It's also, in today's world, it's kind of a nice anti-theft device. So you don't have to worry about someone driving off in your car, because the majority of people today don't know how to drive a manual, unfortunately. But overall, this car, it's comfortable. Again, 12 years old, no creaks, no rattles, no weird things going on. Turn-in is crisp. It's a lot of fun to drive. Easy to manipulate in and out of traffic. Visibility is phenomenal, even though you sit quite low. It's got a beautiful long hood, but it's real easy to understand and feel where the car is, where the nose is, and what you can expect in driving it. Visibility out of the rear view mirror is great. The side views, so you're never driving a car where you're like, wow, I don't know who's near me or what's near me. And the exhaust note on this particular car is great. 63 miles an hour, partial throttle. A lot of cars will drone. This car, it sounds like you would think it'd be a factory sport option. It's definitely noticeable when you drive it and you get on the throttle and you get the revs up above 4,500 RPM. It really wakes the car up. But just putting around, you can have a cell phone conversation. Your head isn't buzzing, so if you're driving the car to Vegas or on long trips, you know, you don't have to worry about bringing earplugs for yourself and or your significant other. It's a great car. Aston Martin's built a really, really nice car. I'm quite impressed, I must say. I think I'd take this home and keep it in the garage for a couple of years. This is a car you could definitely get used to driving. And then for 45 grand, you don't have to tell your coworkers you paid that much. They'll think you spent 100 plus. They'll be asking if you get a raise or something. And it's a hoot to drive. It really is.